Oh, Five Nights at Freddy's had just turned 10 years old. A sentence I'd never thought I'd hear myself say. So while feeling old, I actually went through some of my old drawings around the time where the games first came out, and I stumbled upon one of my drawings that I drew when I was 14 years old. And now being in my early 20s and still drawing to this day, I actually went ahead and decided to draw the same picture again, and at first I did like it, and then after that I started to hate it. Why? Well, it could have been better. So I did better. So in this video, I will show and tell you how I drew Sprintrap as close to the original model as possible. So I first started off with two very rough sketches of the drawing, just putting things down to see as to where everything is supposed to go. And if no one really knew any better, you would honestly think I was drawing Afton from Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria Simulator. Remember that game? Anyways, after finishing up the second rough sketch, I then started working on the final sketch, where I went ahead and made it as detailed as possible so I could make sure as to where things go, where shadows are going to be, where highlights are going to be, etc. This entire sketching process took around, I would say, 30 minutes. And after all that, the final sketch looked like this. Which now leads to the fun part, the coloring process. So as you can see, I was very serious about making this look as accurate as the official model as possible, which is why I had the reference on the left on standby, while I just occasionally used the eyedropper tool just to pick out some of the colors to match it as close as I possibly could. And as you see throughout this entire video, I will also be adding in the tiny details when it comes to the official model, some details that you wouldn't normally see at first glance. That's pretty much how much I've studied this model from top to bottom. But of course, I did miss quite a few. And to my surprise, this wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. But it was still quite a bit of a challenge, but a fun one nonetheless. However, doing some of the parts like these were pretty difficult because there were so many details that I wanted to pay attention to, even though that at first glance, you wouldn't be able to see these details. Besides that, I am a huge sucker for attention to detail, no matter how small that they are, and every time that I did this, it was always worth it for me. One of the most important parts about making this as realistic as possible was just the amount of textures that you have to add into it in order to make it resemble the actual model, and the amount of texture brushes and settings that I had to use for this was insane. It does look pretty sloppy at the moment, but we'll save that for later. So looking back on this, I guess one of the reasons why I didn't find this drawing as difficult as I thought it would be is that most of Sprintrap is just him in the dark, so a lot of the things were just cast in shadows and I didn't really need to pay all that much attention to. And some of the things that I did need to pay attention to, it honestly made it a little bit more easier to draw. Using this amount of black for this drawing actually worked towards my advantage, and it actually made this drawing a lot more realistic in the finished product. And of course, working on the hands and fingers was the hardest part because, well, they're hands. They're never going to give you an easy time. But the interesting thing about them is that the more I worked on them, the more details that I saw that I was able to add that I didn't see before. For example, seeing more of the metallic parts of his broken fingers. And for now, you're just going to see me just adding in colors, and then I will add in the details much later on. So another challenge that I ran across when making this drawing was some of the coloring and shading that I had to do, since as you see me taking and blending in different colors, just making sure that it looks like the reference that I'm basing off of, this took around 3 to 5 minutes to actually get right. Just me adding in and blending in different colors until it got to somewhat of how I wanted it to be like, since I wasn't aiming for 100% accuracy when it came to this drawing, but just accurate enough. So remember when I mentioned about tiny attention to detail that you might not see at first glance? This is just another example of it. And surprisingly, adding in these details was actually the most fun I had while making this drawing. I had no clue why, I just had a lot of fun with it. And now that the drawing is turning out more like the reference, I just went ahead and moved back onto the hand just to show it more love and to also get it out of the way before moving on to the more interesting parts of this drawing. I just did the usual splotching in colors, adding in a little bit of detail, and so forth. So before I started working on the jawline a bit more, I went back and added in a few more details. And one of them was this wire or vein or something. I'm not quite sure, it could be either or. Knowing how this game franchise is, it could be both for all I know. And I had a lot of fun just adding in the shine and the shadows, just making it look as realistic as possible. And of course, adding in tiny details that you will not see in the full product, just because I can. Alright, so we finally moved on to level 2 of this drawing, and once again you're just seeing me put in the bare bone process of just adding in colors and moving them around so I can match the reference image as close as possible. So I finally get to move on to oddly one of my favorite aspects about the render, the endoskeleton itself. This was probably the most enjoyable yet most difficult part of this entire process. This was the main thing I was worried about the most when I started drawing this, mainly because of the perspective and the angle of it, but I somehow managed to make it work, even though it is not completely perfect. It looks a little bit jagged and a little bit lopsided at first, but of course I did went ahead and made some changes both on camera and a little bit off camera. I was in fact struggling the most with the eyes because I either made them too big, too small, I didn't have them in the right angle. As you can see, I kept on having to adjust the nose and the mouth part of it. It was just everything that could have went wrong with it did go wrong, to the point where I just had to stop and move on to something else, and I kind of just fixed it a little bit off camera. I eventually got it right, but it took lots and lots of tweaking and moving things around, as you can see right here, until I finally got it correct. And referring to what I said before about how a lot of the things here are in the dark, it makes the shading and coloring process a lot easier, even though I can draw the rest of the model, though it will probably take an additional 5 hours or more in order to do so. And on the not so bright side, At least it can help small details like these stand out much better. So after procrastinating long enough, I went right back into getting the eyes fixed, and I eventually did with a lot of tweaking and off-camera adjustments and a little bit of on-camera adjustments, as you saw there. They just look a little bit goofy at the moment because I was slightly distracted because I was in the middle of a Discord call when I was doing this part, but later on I will come back to it and add in more details and give it the justice that it deserves. Also, shout out to someone on Discord that said that he looked like he was pogging. I don't know who said it and I don't remember your username, but you got a laugh out of me for saying that. Yeah, these eyes look really goofy right now, but don't worry, they will be fixed very soon. Another fun part about this whole process, because this part was probably one of the easiest. When it comes to drawing and shading wire or coil-like structures, it's just mainly just you taking the darker shades and just shading around the sides and adding highlights in the middle. It's super easy to do. So for this part, I actually did the hand off camera. You didn't really miss anything because this was around the time where I kind of started to get tired, and the rest of this was just filler, so I just decided not to record this bit. But don't worry, as I said, you didn't really miss anything. So with everything colored and shaded in, it's now time to start bringing this drawing together by adding in the tiny details, textures, and anything else I may have missed before or that I was unable to do before. So for this point, it's just filler, so enjoy the process. So when it came down to adding in some of the textures, of course I knew for a fact that I wasn't going to completely replicate the actual model, but I did what I could to make it as close as I possibly could. And with the help of many different kinds of texture and brush settings, I managed to make it work. And with the rest of the details added, here is the full and final finished product. And for the side-by-side comparison, this is my drawing and this is the official model that I based it off of. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it comes pretty close. Easily the most difficult drawing I've done, and the most enjoyable. And I do hope that you enjoyed watching me draw this too. Overall, I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I do thank you so much for watching.